Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where we talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Big Sky. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, what was interesting about this episode, too, is like we have Rick, and Ronald having some disputes, which I think is interesting. Well, I should actually backtrack a little bit. First and foremost, let's bring up the fact is that there's problems at home between Ronald and his mom. That whole scene made me go, is his mom actually real? Is she actually dead and that's all in his head? Just their interactions, her letting him pour cereal on her and just her being so calm about it. It's like just that interactions that they have. Like, granted, I felt it since the first episode of, man, that's a weird relationship. That's a really weird, uncomfortable relationship that I'm like, she's like, and for her to jump to the conclusions, did you have something to do with those women disappearing? Because that seems like your situation. And it's like, and even him bringing it up to Rick, and Rick's like, why would your mom even ask you that? He's like, if someone shot the Pope, my mom would immediately think I did. He's like, well, she didn't ask you about the Pope. She asked you about some missing girls. That's why I'm just like, that seems like that's too much like that's in his own head. Like I said, maybe I'm wrong, but it's just like, and if she does find out what's going to happen, because he's making the whole thing of like, I'm someone that can do what's necessary. And it's like, because for her, it's a whole thing of like, I believe there's more good in you than bad. But if I find out that there's more bad in you than good, then basically kind of implying like she'll turn him in. But I'm like, if you're suspicious, why wouldn't you? Like, that's why I'm like, there's something off about that situation. So that's why I'm like, I don't know if that's something that's just in his head or not. I mean, to be fair, anytime we've ever seen anything with his mom, it's only been scenes with him and his mom. We've never seen we've heard his mom talk about interacting with other people. So not unless we end up finding out, oh, my mom, he goes a little Norman Bates. You know, that's what I'm wondering, like a little psycho-ish. Maybe that's the angle they're going down. Maybe his mom's actually, like when he curled up next to his mom in bed, maybe that was him curling up next to her. Like maybe she's been dead this entire time, but he's caught up in his own delusion. Because, like I said, anytime he's interacted with his mom, it's only just been him, whether it's be over the phone or in person, but we haven't seen her interact with anyone else. We've heard her talk about interacting with other people. So who knows? That's what just like that whole thing makes me think that's in his head. Because, I mean, obviously, if his mom was dead, it's not like, that might be the thing of like, oh, she died and he just never told anyone because he had a mental breakdown or something. I mean, granted, as we can see, Ronald's not the most mentally stable person anyway, so it wouldn't be too far off. But I'm just like, this scene in particular made me go, your mom's dead. This is all in your head, isn't it? Just for her to jump to that conclusion, it just seems like out of nowhere. Maybe, obviously, we already see they have that little contentious relationship they do anyway, so I'm like, oh, either she just died of natural causes and you just never told anyone because you had a mental break and you think she's still alive, or you ended up killing her and having a mental break and pretending like she's still alive. We'll see whether anything comes of that. But kind of circling back to where I started at, the whole Rick and Ronald thing, Rick has set up a situation for, he talks about it later, I think, and I don't think it was in that scene, but, or whatever the case, about how the fact is that no, it was definitely earlier because he had called Ronald about it. But like he had set it up so some people can take them off his hands. Granted, they're not going to get paid, and he's saying it's basically a different syndicate that they're working with. But at the very least, they can get Jerry, Grace, and Danielle off their hands. You know. But obviously, like, that whole thing leads to this back and forth, because Rick is kind of almost wanting to kill Ronald because it's like, yeah, I kind of starting to think that you might be a loose end. And he's like, I'm a loose end. He's basically trying to say, like, oh, I'm stronger. It's like basically gentleness is strength and strength is gentleness, and I'm the gentler man. Because he's like, basically, you kill me, I have plans in place, I have stuff in place that, like, if you kill me, Rick, it's all going to implicate you. And it's like, Rick's like, I'm also anal about keeping up with files, so you think me going down is going to do anything? It's like, I will drag you down too because I got enough dirt to connect you to all this too. So it's just like that little back and forth between them that was kind of like, Ronald's not as submissive as I guess Rick was kind of hoping he would be, or thought he was. Which we should really quickly tap into that whole situation with Ronald going to Mary Lee's place. And I'm like, oh, is that how you want to get back at Rick? You're going to try and seduce his wife? I was like, okay. I was almost thinking like, oh, this is going to implode in your face. But to be fair, in his own twisted way, he knows how to get to her because it's like, well, maybe there is some kindred spiritness there of being lonely and stuff like that. I mean, granted, obviously the conversation he had with Jerry makes you go like, I mean, once again, not the most mentally stable person, but the fact of the matter is he's a lonely dude, so he sees that in Mary Lee, and so he asks her, it's like, no, nothing between us, just dancing. He goes like, oh yeah, there's a taxi dancing, and it's like, oh, like I guess like younger people dance with older women. So I just thought that was like interesting how that whole thing set up. But part of me is also wondering, like, when he was hugging her, like, is it a smile of, yeah, I got you, you fell right into my trap, or is it a, oh, like or like a oh, this is, you fell into my trap, but also this is nice, I do kind of like you. Like, I don't, there's no way that is a, because part of me is like, is there some shape or form he doesn't know that that's Rick's wife? It's like, no, you had to go there specifically because it's Rick's wife. So I guess that's his way to give Rick the middle finger. It's just kind of like, oh, like, once again, he talked about having the gentler hand. I'm the gentler man. So it's like swaying your wife. Because even later on, Rick's like, what have you been doing? He's like, I've been busy. It's like, yeah, busy dancing with your wife, you know? And then Mary Lee comes home. She's like, I was dancing. No such luck as me having an affair. That's all it was. It was dancing, but I like to dance. So, and she's like, I'm going to bed. Rick didn't like that. We see at one point Rick's got the hammer, and you're like, well, to be fair, Rick had a rough day in this episode, but also it makes you go, is he really about to kill his wife over that? Because, you know, Rick is seems like controlling and possessive person. Like, I mean, to be fair, his entire life is falling apart around him, and here's just another thing. It's like, wait, you're stepping out on me? It's like, I didn't have an affair, I'm dancing. It's like, no, that's the same thing, and I guess just kind of, in his mind, it's probably like, you're throwing it in my face, you know? But like I said, Rick kind of had a rough day because Jeannie called up Walter and be like, hey, we need to talk to Rick. It's like, fine, I'll talk. Rick, come in, you know, we'll talk. Then, like, Rick kind of went off the rails heavily because he's being questioned about it. It's like, oh, like, yeah, Cody, you know, yeah, I helped him out a little bit, blah, 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 blah. And then he kind of swerved off of being like, you know, remember when America wasn't so, you know, dim? It used to be so bright. And then, like, you have Walter being like, we need to get back on topic because, like, I'm up here asking you about some missing women and girls, and you up here talking about how America don't shine as bright as it used to. Even because even Walter was kind of it's looking a little suspicious. Like, we need to get back on track. And the way Rick handled that, at first I was like, is this supposed to be like, get you so drummed up that he's making it seem like it's something else? Because he turned it into like, the only reason why you're like backflipping right now, Walter, is because it's a black woman, and he turned it to a whole, like, everything that's going on in the country right now thing of like, oh, if I say Blue Lives Matter, I'm like, whoa, where the fuck did this come from, Rick? I'm like, at first that's why I was like, is this like, it's like, nah, like, why would you go there? Like, the fact is, the way he got, I mean, granted, that could have been him trying to showboat, like, try distracted and make it seem like, oh, you know, make it seem like, you know, I guess try to turn it into something it's not for the purposes of trying to get Walter off his back. But also maybe there is some part of him that, I mean, but then the way he was kind of so strong about it made me think like, oh, are you really about that, Rick? It's like, holy shit. Like, I mean, to be fair, because Rick had this whole point about how he talks about the fact is, and he talks about it later on when it's the Grace, Danielle, and Jerry, about how he wanted to clean up. Like, and that's what I was talking about before, like how, you know, how Ronald was saying like, well, Jerry, don't worry, you're going to go off somewhere, you're going to be able to do what you're going to be able to do, but you're going to be safe. Like, they are like so deluded that they think they're doing, like, we've got to do some bad to do some good. And so in his mind, Rick is like, oh, let's get rid of all these prostitutes, and we're going to save America's young women from going down this filthy, like, life. You know, like, that's what it seems like. It seems like he's like, we're cleaning up America. He's like, I'm doing my part to clean up. Like, he deluding himself into being like some savior of like, I'm saving this country. But, you know, circling, you know, so that's why I'm like, it seems like it is like a religious thing. So like I said, I don't know if it's necessarily connected to that cult or not. I mean, well, that church that kind of gets labeled as a cult that Jenny visited last episode, the one that Cody was supposed to be visiting. Because even then, it's like, where did Cody get that idea? It's like, he's like, oh, must have heard it from the rumors and the web and stuff like that. It's like, which is, you know, obviously we as the audience know, he's the one that put that in Cody's mind. You know, he needed to kind of, Cody's looking a little too deep, got to give him someone else to look at, which is interesting. I mean, I guess he was hoping that Cody would do what he did and tell someone else that, so anyone else going forward would be looking towards the church instead of towards him. I was about to say, what's the point? Because you're going to end up. I mean, maybe at that time he hadn't considered killing Cody yet until like Cody really started being like, oh, there's a truck driver and everything because Cassie has suggested, and so so maybe it's that last second situation. Damn it, I got to kill you now. But regardless of all that. Just Rick going off like that, making it seem trying to make it seem like it's like even him being like, oh, equality has kind of gone too far and stuff like that. I mean, it's like, for one, you kind of want to take a step back because you're like, there's a lot of people that'll tell you, a lot of countries, America's no different, have very dim histories where you're like, it didn't shine as bright as you think it did. I mean, maybe from your perspective it did, so, but that's why I'm just kind of, and even later on, he meets Jenny and is like, yeah, have any word from Cody? And he's like, and he's talking about, see what I mean? Look at, like Cassie here, attacking my badge, my. And that's why I love the most about it too, because I'm like, you're up here getting up in arms about it. It's like, you did do something though. You are in the wrong. But I guess it's like they don't have any proof they're coming. It's like, I mean, to be fair, that's kind of anyone that gets caught for something. It's like you get super defensive, and he got ultra super defensive, and that just makes you look even more. Walter never really made it clear how he stands on it, but even, I guess maybe he bought into it. Well, I guess that's just how Rick is. Like, I see how you are. Like, I guess you have your feelings about this whole thing, but I guess in his mind it's like, because Walter and Rick apparently go back, so I guess it's a thing of like, well, yeah, that's Rick being Rick. And it's like, I mean, granted, that whole Blue Lives Matter thing doesn't relate, but I mean, he's able to feel, maybe that's as far as Walter looks at it. He probably doesn't look at it as like, oh, Rick being super guilty. Obviously we have that perspective because it's like, oh, we know you were responsible for, we know you killed Cody, so that's what makes you getting all up in arms about is making it an issue. Like, oh, how dare Cassie attack my badge and stuff like that. Like, it's like, you are in the wrong here. That's the effed up like irony behind it, like you getting up in arms about it. But regardless, circling back to Grace, Danielle, and Jerry, obviously they had like some spam there that they're waiting for maggots to come up and get on because they need to put it on Danielle's wounds. I mean, not Danielle, Grace's wounds, because it's getting infected. She's getting a fever. So, and it's just kind of like that, makes your skin crawl type of situation. But obviously it didn't help. Obviously Ronald came back to give medicine. Didn't work out, so it's like she needs something stronger. But I also thought it was interesting because Rick was just kind of like, and then Ronald was like, hey, are you okay? Which I'm like, oh, at that point you had already gone to try and seduce his wife by being like, oh, let's go dancing. So it's interesting for you to be showing all this concern now, but it's like, I guess you don't want to, show your hand too quickly, right? Or at all, I guess in this case. But I just thought that was interesting, how it seems like you care about him in some points and just kind of try and screw him over on other points. But, Rick shows up later on to give, stronger medicine and stuff like that. And it's just like, it's like, oh, I should wash out your filthy mouth with soap. It's like, what about, and, Grace had brought up his filthy mouth because, like, once again, in his mind, it's like, you're two wholesome underage girls, that sadly got caught up in this web, this web of trying to clean up. It's like I said, they think they're doing like a public, we kind of got Ronald's perspective on, but now we're, as each episode passed, we're getting more and more of Rick's perspective on like how he thinks, it's almost like I'm fighting for the soul of this country, which is interesting because I've heard a character say that really recently, and it's like, you wouldn't want to compare Rick to this certain character that I'm thinking of. Rick wouldn't want to be compared, but in his mind, he thinks he's saving like the soul of this country by like, I'm cleaning up the muck that is the stuff that's dimming this country. I guess I'm sure maybe certain words he'd probably use, it would be, rather than dim, he'd probably say damn, you're damning this country's soul or whatever. I don't know. We really don't know we're getting more of a picture, but even then we still don't fully understand like Rick's whole situation. Obviously Jenny and Cassie are obviously, tracking Rick. But also, they're looking into some of the truck drivers because they're like, Rick has to have a partner in this. Obviously, they see Jerry, but there's not enough of a camera angle for them to see like what truck she got into. So, when it's all said and done, though, it's they find one potential, person, and obviously Jenny's going to go undercover because she's had previous experience with that, and she gets in home dude's truck, and then it turns out he's a bit of a germaphobe, because even I was like, oh, because he's like, are you clean? And he's like, I'm gonna need you to, sanitize, and she's like, okay, and he's like, I need you to wipe yourself down and everything. I was like, okay, because at first when he was pointing down like, you need to wipe there, I was like, she was just wiping down her legs, but I was like, I thought he was implying, if this was probably like on like an HBO or Showtime, it probably would have went there. Since it's ABC, they're not going to go there, but I was also just like, he's like, and like, even if you found some evidence, like, you probably wouldn't find any, because he's very, he's germophobic, so there wouldn't be any evidence left behind. He would, so that was interesting. He made it clear, kind of like, usually he likes Russian women, just because in his mind it's like, they're more hygienic, but he's like, under the circumstances, you get what you take what you get type of situation. I was like, that's interesting. But I like, even if he was the guy, which he's not, I don't think you'd find any evidence just because he's too much of a germaphobe. I mean, maybe I could be mistaken. Maybe you'll find something connecting him to something else. But obviously, we as the audience know Ronald's the one responsible for all this, which is interesting. Because while that was happening, Ronald was off dancing with Mary Lee. It was kind of like, there's this weird part where he's just kind of like, he seems like, maybe he's not too much of a douchey dude, because, I mean, to be fair, we did learn about his police record beforehand, and it's like, because for a second you're like, like him seeming like germophobic and stuff like that, he's like, wait, you're a cop? Like, he seemed like almost a little mousy in that moment. But then he got super aggressive when he was like, you won't take my stuff, let me see your badge again, I don't believe you're a cop. And then he pulls a knife out, and then later on pulls out a gun. So it's like, well, once again, going back to that record, because you're like, right, they did say like he's abused women, like it's some of like his some of the charges against him, so it's like, but obviously Walter's kind of like, you guys are kind of going too far, don't expect any help from this precinct anymore, so they're kind of out on their own on this. So, but obviously because Denise was keeping an eye on where Rick had gone, it's like, he went to this abandoned place out there on his own, and lo and behold, he was there for like 30 minutes. I need to circle back really quickly too, because I didn't talk about like everything with Cassie this episode, because we learned a bit about her. For one, we learned her mom killed herself when Cassie was 11. Obviously her husband, we that storyline had come up before about the fact is that he had died when and because I wasn't like, I had initially attributed it being like, I assumed it was a military thing, but I wasn't sure if like, maybe he died in an accident and it's like uniform, so I assumed like she was talking about military, but I was thinking, it could have been like, maybe it was an accident and like the police is what she was referring to, but it's like, no, it is in fact military. Because her dad is realizing, like, he's like, are you okay? Because he's like, you look like you're undone. Which I love that wording, because obviously David E. Kelly's behind this, who was also behind The Undoing. So just that word choice made me go, hey! But regardless, obviously, but when you actually do look at it, you can tell, like, Cassie just looks just down. Like, you could just look, like, the look in her eyes, it looks like she has bags on her eyes, like she hasn't slept, or like, maybe it's from crying so much, obviously, because her dad's like, after what happened, like after your husband, like told you, basically he's like, I gave you bad advice to kind of keep going, and and for him, he feels like, do you love Cody? And she's like, maybe. And he's like, maybe I gave you the wrong advice, that maybe I should have told you to take time just to cry, because I guess he feels like he didn't give her the best advice, and because of that, maybe that led to her eventually finding someone like Cody. And now these current situations, like, if I'd taken the time, like, it's just, I think he's trying to say, like, you never really took the time out to grieve your husband, like to cry like I should have told you, like, you've probably felt the need to like stay strong for her son Kai. So and I think probably in general she probably is like, no, I can't show that side of myself. So, but obviously, she's asking her dad, like, how, because there's a whole conversation about, like, Kai's asking about, what's life about, and it's like, I was wondering, the first thing that came to her mind was, like, the cruelty of the world. It's like, and then we learned about, what she's been through, and it's like, life has been pretty cruel to Cassie, but it's like, she didn't bring that, because she's like, maybe we should arm our kids with a little more pessimism rather than optimism, because it's like we give them hope and stuff like that, but this world sucks. Things about this world can kind of suck, because she even talks about the fact is those particular things weren't even what she was necessarily talking about. So it's more so just that people suck, and it's like preparing it's like, but you don't want your kid going through life just being pessimistic about just like, oh, humanity sucks, what's the point, and it's like, how did you keep going forward? He's like, I just did. But she was like, how? After what happened with mom. And he said, I had you just like you have Kai. So I'm curious to kind of see where things kind of go, because I think at the very least for Cassie, she has this case to keep her going forward. But obviously I'm sure that also fuels a lot of that, multiple, not just the whole Cody element of it, that's a big enough thing on its own, but also like what humans are capable of trying to traffic. Like a case like this is going to like chip away at your soul a little bit. Just it makes you probably go like, fuck humanity type of situation, And but circling back to where I was before, we have Ginny and Cassie investigating the place Rick was at, and they found the barn and everything. But the moment they were there, I was like, oh, are you going to find the girls? Like, I was like, that's going to be interesting. I was like, this is episode 4. I didn't expect you to do that. But then I was like, it's too soon. You're going to be there. You're going to find the place, but you're not going to find the girls. And sadly, they don't. Like, because obviously for Cassie, she's like, it's like I've solved the math problem, but I can't. I didn't show my work. It's like, I know there's something here. They know it's important to Rick because he stopped by there, but they don't know the ins and outs of it. It's like they were so close. They were literally standing on top of where they were at, but obviously they couldn't hear them, sadly. It's like, because I'm about to say, like, how would you know to necessarily look? Because, like, the doorway is covered up, too, so you'd have to, like, know specifically to look for the door, so you'd have to know to move, like, that wheelbarrow or whatever out of the way so that you can get to the door, plus, like, they're in a container, too, so that probably makes it like, unless you're super close, you probably won't, because obviously like Ronald didn't hear them singing until he got down there and got close is kind of when he started hearing them sing, so plus it probably it being reinforced probably made it so that the sound doesn't escape as much as it did before. Maybe not, but it's just kind of like a damn, so close yet so far away type of situation. So some interesting stuff. I'm curious to see ultimately where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and good